Welcome, I'm GTGD, and in this video we're going to start an empty project and get started. So I'll show which packages I'm using, and I'll talk about the editor, just to talk about a few of its features, etc. So the very first thing to do, if you haven't already, is to download Unity. I'd recommend downloading the Unity Hub, and from that you can install different versions of Unity, and you can also, of course, see your projects that you've opened or created. It's pretty convenient that way. You'll need to create a Unity account as well. I'm using a personal edition. That's a free edition. So yeah, you'll need a Unity account to start with. Okay, so once you've downloaded the Unity Hub, yeah, make sure to log in and then open it up. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is to create a brand new project. I'm going to select the 2D template. All that does is it's going to set up basically the project camera, etc. to look in the correct orientation. We'll be looking at the XY plane as I just already set up for us. And I'm just going to make a project and call it like GTGD S2 Learn Unity 2D. That's going to be my project name. You can call your project whatever you want to call it. And then I'm going to create it. And it'll just take a little while to load up. Alright, so my project's loaded up. It took a little while, took over a minute for it to prepare the project. And it looks like I've got a default window arrangement here of some sort. Could be my own. But anyway, what I like to do is I like to move things around so that like the scene view is what you work with. This is where you put stuff in the game, and you work from this in the editor. The game view is showing you what your players are going to see in game, and that's what you're going to see too when you hit this play button. You'll start playing the game. And let's have a look here. Scale. So I've got my scale also set to something unusual there, but that's pretty much that. Now I can move things around, and I can also pretty much change my layout. So I've got a whole bunch of layouts here. There's a default one. I've got my own from the past that I use. I mean, I use one called GTGD S2, and I use that. You can save a layout, so that's how your windows are arranged. So what if I just hit the default? So this is the default. So I had some other arrangement open there from another project, and this is how it looks to begin with. Now, it's an alright sort of a layout. It's okay, but I find it a bit limiting to work with. So I like to take my windows, I like to move them around a bit. So I like to move my project folder over there. I like to move the hierarchy over here. The project folder is what your Windows folders are. Basically, it's that. Now, as for the hierarchy, that's everything in your actual game. So inside of it, there's only a main camera at the moment. It's in 2D. The game, the scene layout is in 2D. The world of Unity is actually 3D. But when you select the 2D template, it just simplifies a lot of stuff. There's no skybox. It's removed for you because you don't need that in 2D. And it already orients the camera to look in 2D. It's already an orthographic camera, which is suited for 2D games instead of perspective. So I'll just jump that back to that, and I'll just hit back to 2D. And 2D is looking at the X and Y axes. So if you just see there up there, you'll see it was an X and Y just briefly lit up. So that's what the 2D world is. It's an X and Y plane. What I also like to do is I just like to take the scene view, and I like to separate it from the game view. Basically, if I just take that up, put it over there, and bring this here, and try and really just minimize the console a bit. Excuse me as I fiddle around here a bit. Okay, no, that's not at all what I was intending. So let me push this back and get this over here. What I am trying to do is to minimize. Okay, that's a lot better. I was trying to minimize the console as much as possible. The console is where you get errors or warnings, and also messages that you create inside of your code, like tell yourself information of what's happening in your script, and we'll be doing that. So that's all good. Okay, so we've got our basic layouts done. We're going to add a few more tabs as well. So I like to add the profiler You use the profiler to see the performance of your game. So when you're running your game, you can see basically, how much resources are getting allocated to what. So if I just stop anywhere like that, and it's on player loop, whatever, it's hardly using anything. It's like, you can see it's running at 200 FPS, basically 200 frames per second, which is massively fast because there's absolutely nothing in the scene. Normally you would, if you're running at 60 FPS, that's really good. So you can see for my computer anyway, everyone's computer is different. I should just clarify that. Every PC, depending on the power of your PC, so if you've got a much more powerful PC, you will be a lot more performant, and for you 60 FPS will mean something else. Now I'll just stop that, playing that. And another thing that I typically use is the frame debug. So I think it's, let me check, where would it be? So under window analysis, there's a frame debugger. And I like to use that too, to understand, how much effort is required to generate the scene, how much effort is required basically from a graphics perspective to draw the scene. So how many batches basically are involved, and more batches to draw the scene, then the more intense it is for the graphics card basically. So the two together help you to really get a good understanding of how performant your game is. Let's have a look at another item here. So I usually add over here, I'll create a window, AI navigation, and this one I usually like to put here with a hierarchy. I rarely use it, but it's good for defining the agents. That's all we'll use it for, or might use it for, with this 2D. Baking, you'll see, is done with a different tool. So that's our inspector done, but I would also like to pull up basically our 2D tile palette, if I've pronounced that correctly. I've got no idea if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You can tell me about that if if I'm saying that even remotely correctly. So if I move that over, so this is our tile palette, and we do need to create one. We're going to do that, I guess maybe the next video when we start actually making a few textures and setting up our tile maps. Now what we need to do, we need to bring up the package manager. So if we go here, window, package manager, right. Now we need to bring in a couple of Unity packages that are essential for our project. So one of them is this one right here. You can search for a package right like this. You can say, tilemap. And there we go. It sort of narrowed that down nicely for me. And I can see that actually it's already installed. So that is awesome. So when I picked the 2D mode, it installed it for me, and that's what I need. So just make sure this is installed. Perhaps one day, if you're using a much more advanced, a much newer version of Unity beyond 2021, it just might be part of Unity. You might not even have to do that step. Now, the next thing I want to get is Cinemachine. So let's go and get Cinemachine. Oh, it's not in the project. Correction. Another thing I need to do is I need to go select Unity Registry. Okay, now these are all of the Unity projects, and if I want to display preview projects, you click that gear icon, pick it Advanced, and say Enable pre-release packages, and I'll just come up with this message that you acknowledge that could destroy your project, blah blah blah, sort of thing. Anyways, okay, that's an exaggeration. It's not going to do that, very unlikely. But anyway, that was the only pre-release project there. Now I want to install the next thing, which is Cinemachine. So that was what I was trying to do there. And this one, yep, I need to install it. It's not installed. So let's go ahead and install that. And for me, that's the latest version. So obviously, if you're doing this a lot more in the future, there'll be a much newer version, or it could be just inbuilt as part of the Unity environment when you load it up. Anyway, it'll take a little while for it to load into the project. Okay, that's Cinemachine installed. The next thing is I need the universal render pipeline. So, well, it's universal RP. That was it right there. And so currently the game world is rendered with the standard built-in rendering pipeline. And Unity has two others, the high definition render pipeline and the universal render pipeline. And I recommend taking the universal render pipeline, installing it. It's very, very performant. So I've used it in a game not too long ago, about a year ago, thereabouts, and it is very, very performant, very impressive, much more resource, much less resource intensive than the standard built-in rendering pipeline of Unity. So definitely recommend using Universal RP in your projects. And also other stuff like just plain old doing post-processing is quite a lot simpler with it. So it's a big advantage every way. Okay, so that is now installed. And now we have to make use of it. So I need to do a few things to be actually able to use it. Oh, by the way, if these folder icons look too big, what you need to do is there's this slider down here. Just go ahead and minimize that. And that's actually how I prefer to look at it. So I'm going to actually just create a new folder because I'm going to make a URP asset. So if I go to my Edit, Project Settings, and then I go to Graphics, it currently doesn't have a render pipeline asset. So when you use URP, it expects you to create one, and there's more than one option, and that's why it hasn't created one for us. So I'm just going to make this folder. I'm going to call it URP. And inside of it, I'm going to create rendering, universal render pipeline, and I'm going to pick pipeline asset 2D renderer. Okay, and I'll just hit enter there. I'll just do that, and it's created two things for us. One is the actual asset, and the other is basically some definitions for the renderer. If I just move that tile palette a bit down, perhaps it will help a bit, so we can see a little bit about the universal render pipeline. There's some stuff here we are actually going to come and talk a little bit about this. I mean, it's all set up correctly. You'll see here post-processing is not enabled. Now we are going to use post-processing later. Post-processing, by the way, is all about making your project just look a bit more fancy without using, well, hopefully not using too much graphics resource to make it happen. And you'll see if you just Google post-processing Unity, you'll immediately know what I'm talking about. It's basically screen effects to make things look a bit more interesting, look a bit better. So I'm just going to hit enable there. I'm actually just going to enable that because I'll probably forget to do it otherwise. And then if we actually go into the pipeline asset, you can see there are all these settings here. Now, most of them don't really mean very much for us because we're not doing a 3D game. So there's like all this lighting and stuff. We are actually going to use 2D lighting. It's quite different. And we aren't going to have any 3D shadows or anything. So none of that really matters for us. Something that is very important here is the SRP batcher. You definitely want that enabled. That's where you get a lot of benefit from using the universal render pipeline because it's very smart in how it just batches, basically groups lots of stuff together and renders it all in one go to make, I guess, the rendering a lot more efficient. Now let's go back to Edit, Project Settings, Graphics, and drop in our asset. Okay, so there we go. Now we're actually set up to use this. Now, if you actually had some things in your scene, I don't think anything will happen here, but let's say, for example, if I created a cube like that, look, there's no issue with it. It's material that it's going to have. So there's something called a material. That's what you actually see in the game. The material is what allows you to see the object. The material will typically have a texture on it and some other definitions. So this is the lit material. This one doesn't have a texture, it's just a default Unity material. Now, if we had objects already in here when we were, before we converted over to Universal Render Pipeline, it probably would have gone pink and would have had an old Unity standard material on there. You can see this material is inside of the Universal RP folder, and that's under the Packages folder. So it's a subfolder of that. And these are all the packages I've got installed in here. Now, if you had that problem with the Pinkness, so you go here to Edit, Render Pipeline, Universal Render Pipeline, and you would just upgrade the project materials to Universal RP materials. And that will sort it all out automatically for you. It'll just figure out what is the closest relevant material and just apply it for you, which is great. So I'll just get rid of that cube. There's no need for that. Okay, let's see some other things. So right now, our scene is called sample scene, which is fine because I'm not going to do anything better. I'm actually just going to call it game scene. So I'm hardly any bit more creative than that, but that's what I choose to call it. So I just reloaded that. I haven't done anything, so just reloaded. I mean, just rename that, and that's now my game scene. You could build and run the game already now. You'd go to build settings first. You'd add the open scene, which it already is. You can build and run. It'll ask you to create a folder, and then you can, it'll launch the game from there. And you'll be able to, it's an exe file, and you can go ahead and launch it. Obviously, we've got absolutely nothing to play here, so no point in that. Now we aren't done. There's one more project, one more package that we need. So I need you to Google up NavMesh plus GitHub. Okay, so you can see I've already been searching for that, of course. And this is the one. We want Hitman NavMesh plus. This is what is going to allow us to do 2D navigation super duper easy. This is what enables us to take advantage of what Unity has inbuilt and apply that to the 2D world and be able to dynamically update the NavMesh at runtime for the 2D world, and it just works really well. So yeah, I'd recommend that you download the zip. So go ahead and do that, download the zip, and then we're going to bring it into the Unity folder. So I've got my NavMesh Plus downloaded here, the zip here. So you just need to extract it. Okay, so that's the NavMesh Plus master, and inside of it are all the files. So you'll want to copy this folder. Now let's go to Unity, and in the assets folder, within the assets folder, just what you can do is right click and say show in Explorer. So you can go and look inside of Windows. So this is our project. That's my project that I made there. So if I click under assets, I'm going to paste it directly into here, and that's it. So I've got this Unity package, this package now installed within Unity. I hope one day that actually NavMesh Plus just becomes a standard Unity package. It is really that good. It makes life so much easier. It would be great if it was. There are a few warnings that appear because it's a little bit old compared to the current version of Unity that I'm using. So perhaps when you use it, you may see the same warnings. Maybe you won't. Maybe the package is updated by then. So what we're going to do, we are actually going to go ahead and edit these scripts so that they don't have these warnings. So I'll just double click that. And so that opened up the script for us. It's not immediately obvious where the issue is, but now I can see it's got these highlighted in green. Don't worry, we don't need to know what the script is doing. So if you're not familiar with scripting or anything, look, I don't even know how this script fully works myself because I haven't read it all and haven't dissected it to figure it out. It's a huge script, but that's all good. Removing errors from code like this is pretty standard when you're using packages from the asset store and stuff. It's pretty normal because Unity is always advancing, always improving, so stuff gets old after a while and deprecated. That's the word that they use. And it's one thing is it's suggesting to us, so Visual Studio is telling us this information that prefab asset path has been deprecated. Use asset path instead. Alright, so is it really just that simple? So do I just say prefab stage dot asset path? Well, it looks like it is just that simple. So I'm going to just copy that, paste it over here, correct that bit of code there, and I think that's it for this script. Alright, so next let's go back to Unity, and it's going to compile that script since I made a change and I saved it. So I just hit Control S, save, of course. And there's still some more warning messages about obsolete code appearing. So I double click that, and once again, I'm in here. So again, same thing. So I'll just paste that in, asset path, prefab stage asset path. And just let it roll over. And this one, well, that's just some Unity engine thing, whatever. So you'll always see some strange Unity messages appear from time to time. I have no idea what this one is. It has no effect on anything that we're going to do, so I'm just going to flat out ignore that. Alright, so all good. So now we have pretty much everything that we need. Oh, and I should just say, well, while we're talking about the console, if you want to get rid of stuff, the messages, whenever you click the play button, just press this down arrow, select clear on play, clear on build. It's a good idea. Another thing too, when you're debugging, that's very useful as well. If you go to your file build settings and you select development build, I'm pretty sure that's the one. If I'm remembering correctly, then if you have profiling is only available enabled in a development player, right? So when you have a development build enabled and you build and run and you keep the editor open, so then you can be playing with that standalone player, and I'm pretty sure it'll send messages here, and you can actually view it from the profiler to see as well how your built game is performing. A few other things about the scene itself, you can change the mode of how you view it and stuff. You're just using shaded mode, I think, overwhelmingly. Obviously 2D, this is lights in the scene. Actually, I never checked if 2D lights are affected by that. Definitely 3D lighting is affected if you turn that on and off. This is sounds in the scene, so whether you want to hear the sounds, it's important, I guess, when you're placing it and you're moving around in the scene. And there's other stuff like skybox flares, etc. and whatnot, and that's the grid as well. I personally don't even touch those. And then the gizmos as well. This can be sometimes important to deal with. Just like if the icons are getting in the way, you need to just pretty much minimize the size of the icons. You can also select which gizmos are visible in your scene view, so in case it's getting cluttered up, you might want to turn off a few things. But yeah, I'll just leave that on as it is. Another important thing is layers, so this will make more sense later when you have stuff in layers in your game. Well, actually, I don't actually make much use of, I don't think I make any use of layers in this project, but they can be quite useful in the 3D world when you're doing raycasting and you're trying to block out stuff. Then you'll use layers for that. One area it is very useful is for turning on and off the UI in the scene view. So that's something I do normally in layers. So because the UI is huge, generally relative, you'll find the UI is just crowding up the whole scene view. So you'll come here and turn it off and when you're not using it, and then you'll turn it back on when you need to edit it, etc. So that's just pretty much that. Another useful thing is that if you're dragging stuff, components on, or you're selecting items in here, but you want to keep the inspector looking at an individual game object, you'll lock it. So that'll lock the inspector on that item, so then you can edit it, etc. And if you click on other stuff, you won't lose it from your inspector view. That's very important. You'll use that a lot. I think that's pretty much it for this video. So in the next video, we're going to get on to actually doing some stuff. We'll just basically draw some basic pixel arts, a few of them, and set up our tile maps. And I think lighting as well. Yeah, set up lighting as well.